You're listening to the Life Coaching Secrets Podcast, episode number 91. Did you know that life coaches are needed now more than ever? I'm Frank Macri, founder of Thriving Coach Academy. I've trained over 1,000 coaches and helped them launch their own successful coaching businesses. If you want to make an incredible income and impact as a coach and have a lot of fun doing it, I'll show you exactly how to get it done. This is Life Coaching Secrets. What's up, coaches? In this episode, I'm going to talk about how do you ask the right coaching questions in a session. Now, as a reminder, this podcast is part of a series I am doing this month of December called the 12 Days of Podcasts, where I am releasing a dozen episodes teaching you how to be successful as a life coach. So make sure that you subscribe to the Life Coaching Secrets podcast so you don't miss a single one. All right, so how do you ask the right coaching questions in a session? This is one of the most common concerns that coaches have. It's something that we provide a lot of support on inside the academy, and it is one I'm going to dive into here. So when we go into just the idea of asking someone questions, in order to be good at asking questions, you need to have the gift of curiosity. Now, curiosity is one of the signs that you are born to be a coach, meaning you're someone that is interested. You take an interest in others. You take an interest in people. That is how I define curiosity. And if you are someone who naturally wants to understand people, if you want to explore what makes someone tick, then you are a curious person. This is one of the most important qualities to have as a coach. However, a lot of coaches do make some mistakes when it comes to knowing the most effective way to use their curiosity in a coaching session. So in this episode, what I've done is I've come up with the 4 different flavors of curiosity. So that way you can know how to avoid the flavors of curiosity that won't serve you in a session and focus on the one that will serve you the most. Because when you're able to know how to use your curiosity appropriately, you will know how to ask the most appropriate questions. Now, even though this episode is called Asking the Right Coaching Questions, I want to make sure that you understand that whenever a client is presenting a challenge to you in a session, there is no such thing as one right question. There's no one perfect question that you could ask, because coaching is much more of an art than a science. So I don't want you to think that there's only one right or perfect question. This is one of those rules and expectations that coaches put on themselves, which causes you to diminish your curiosity when you assume that there's one magical question that you need to ask and put the pressure on yourself to ask it. So instead of thinking of what is the right coaching question to ask, I want you to take away from this episode, how could I approach this client with the appropriate curiosity, with the ideal flavor of curiosity, okay? So as you have that foundation, that's going to set you up for really taking in what I want you to understand in this episode. So when you ask someone a question, what happens in our brain is our brain starts going on a scavenger hunt to find the answer. So if you think about, you ask someone a certain question, whether or not they're aware of it, their brain is going to start looking for answers to that question. So with that in mind, it's important to understand the way that you ask a question, the words that you use when you ask a question, because when those come together, that's going to influence the type of response it will evoke from your client. So here's an example. If your client were to share something that they did and you said in response to that, "Why would you do that?" versus saying, "I'm curious, what inspired you to do that?" Two questions that are essentially wanting to explore someone's motivation, but they're worded just a little bit differently, and the tone is different, and therefore it's going to evoke a very different type of response from your client. So when it comes to knowing how to ask appropriate questions in sessions, you want to be aware of the words that you use when you're asking questions, and also the way in which you ask your client questions, okay? So as I started to do a deeper dive into the ways that you can ask questions, what I've come to understand is there are 4 different flavors to curiosity. And you can think of these flavors as like different expressions of how you can explore with a client, okay? Now, these different flavors of curiosity can make or break a coaching session. So it's extremely important that you have an awareness of what these are and making sure that you are avoiding the 3 that you don't want in a session, all right? So you're probably ready by now to understand what these flavors of curiosity are. So the 4 types of curiosity are judgmental curiosity, disorganized curiosity, biased curiosity, and finally neutral curiosity. And I'm going to explain what each of these 4 mean and how you can avoid the ones that aren't effective and focus on the one that is. So again, they're judgmental curiosity, disorganized curiosity, biased curiosity, and finally neutral curiosity. Neutral curiosity is the flavor of curiosity that you want in a session. Neutral curiosity is what will inspire you to ask the quote, right coaching questions, the most effective coaching questions, all right? So let's start with judgmental curiosity. So judgmental curiosity is when you ask questions in a way that would provoke defensiveness from your client, where you are assuming that what they're doing, there's something wrong with your client. You're giving off that impression. You might directly ask a client, well, what's wrong with you? Or the example I shared earlier, which is, why would you do that? Why didn't you know better? Or why didn't you follow through? So you notice the tone is judgmental. Now, this doesn't happen very often in a coaching session, at least from the coaches I've trained. I don't really hear coaches having judgmental curiosity. However, it is one flavor of curiosity that one might have. Maybe you've experienced this in your own relationships with people who they are curious, but it comes across in a very judgmental way. So obviously, this is not going to be effective in helping you better understand yourself or your clients understand themselves. So you want to avoid judgmental curiosity at all costs. The second type of curiosity is what I call disorganized curiosity. So disorganized curiosity is when you are just gathering so much irrelevant and miscellaneous details from your client. It's when your curiosity and your questions are all over the place, okay? So for example, if a client were to if a client were to want to explore in a session their frustration that they experienced because they were driving and a car cut them off, and they wanted to explore why that caused so much frustration for them. Disorganized curiosity would be you asking them questions like, well, how fast were you driving? Or where were you driving? What part of the state or the highway or the city? What city were you driving in? So all of these questions are a form of curiosity. It's taking an interest in your client, but it's so disorganized. It's not tied into what we call your client's agenda. So it's not really tied into them getting what they really want from this session. I kind of think of disorganized curiosity of like how a child might be curious, where they'll constantly have all of these questions and be asking things all over the place, and you're just going in circles. So this is what I call disorganized curiosity. And this is not useful in a coaching session. You don't want to be just asking questions for the sake of asking questions. You want to make sure that your questions are aligned with your client getting what they ultimately want from the session. And you want to ask questions that are helping your client better understand what their thoughts are, what their emotions are, what the rules and expectations are that they're having. So it's helping your client better understand themselves versus disorganized curiosity, which is very surface level, and it's more so just focusing on the story, the miscellaneous details about the story. So this is what I call disorganized curiosity. Also want to leave that out of your coaching sessions. The third type of curiosity is called biased curiosity. So biased curiosity is when you ask clients leading questions. So leading questions are questions that they put your client in a way where there's really only one way they can answer it, and you are in a way pushing them to answer it in a certain way. So you have in your mind that there is a right way to answer your questions, and you're kind of in a way pushing your client to answer it. So that way they go where you think they should go in the coaching session. So this actually happens quite common, especially with untrained coaches or when coaches are newer. This is a big piece of feedback that we give our newer coaches in the academy, is helping them take away the bias that they might have in their questions. So a reason why you might have some biased curiosity in your coaching sessions is because you might have the thought that you know better. You might think that you know better, that you have the solution, and you need to rescue or save your client. So it's very important for you to understand your role as a coach in order to get out of having biased curiosity. It is not your job to rescue clients. It's not your job to fix them. It's not your job to save them or to heal them because they're not broken. They're not damaged. It is your job to raise your client's awareness so your client can make the most informed decisions to move their life forward. It's your job to help your client come to their own conclusions, to connect their own dots, okay? So you don't want to think that you are the solution or you have the solution for your client. You instead want to believe that your client has the solution, and you're just simply asking them questions to remove any blocks, any internal blocks, keeping them from accessing the answers that your client already has within. So your clients already have the answers from within, and your client is much greater and much wiser than they see themselves to be, and even they appear to be. So it's very important to really see your client as a hero rising to the occasion, as the source of their own solution versus you being the source. Therefore, once you believe that, you won't have this part of you that feels that you need to lead a client. So an example of a leading question is when you start a question with the phrase, well, what if you, or, well, what if you considered, or what if you tried? Any of these types of questions are leading because you are basically telling the client what to do. Okay, you are having an influence in how the client's going to answer. Okay, so it's very important to realize that your clients are the source. They are the ones who know what is best for them. When you assume that you know what's right, it's very disempowering in your coaching session. It's very disempowering. Okay. So another example of how you might have biased curiosity is if you ask a question like, so are you happy with that decision, client? So I know that on the surface, that might sound like a totally neutral, normal question to ask a client. If you say, are you happy with that decision, or are you comfortable with that decision you're making? That is kind of leading because you are imposing on your client that they should feel happy about their decision, that they should feel comfortable about their decision. So there's some bias there. This is one that we often give feedback on when our coaches ask their clients, so do you feel comfortable or do you feel motivated to do that? Because again, there's a bias there in assuming that someone needs to feel motivated to do something, or they need to feel comfortable in order to do something. So removing the bias and having complete neutral, unbiased curiosity would be, well, how do you feel about your decision? So hear the difference when you just strip that all away. Okay, and finally, the flavor of curiosity that you want to have in coaching sessions, the flavor that will inspire you to ask the most empowering questions are coming from what we call neutral curiosity, okay? So neutral curiosity is when you truly want to understand a person without any bias about who you think they should be. So neutral comes across in the words that you use and also the tone that you use in your coaching session. Okay, so it's not just about the exact words and way you create certain questions. It is the tone in which you present and articulate those questions. So I encourage you as a coach to have a neutral tone in your sessions, okay? So in the very beginning of this episode, I gave that example of instead of asking, why would you do that? What's wrong with you? You would say, I'm curious. What got in your way of following through? I'm curious. What inspired you to do that? See, neutral tone, very powerful in a coaching session. So part of being having neutral curiosity is asking a lot of clarifying questions. So some of my favorite questions to ask in coaching sessions are questions like, tell me more about blank, or say more about blank. Or when you say blank, client, what do you mean by that? When you say blank, what does that mean to you? What does that bring up for you? So these are very simple, neutral, curious questions that will always generate awareness for your client. They're not pushing them to go one way or another. They allow your client to bring up more awareness, okay? So that is an example of how you can be and how you could express neutral curiosity in your coaching session. So let me give you an example of how a client may bring something up to a session and how your brain might start to go in all these different types of flavors of curiosity. Let's say that your client comes to the session and they are struggling with an ex that they broke up with last year, and they're thinking about reaching back out to their ex to maybe get back into a relationship with them. So just when I share that example, notice, where did your brain go? Did you start coming to conclusions? Did you start making assumptions? Did you start having an idea of whether or not your client should reach out to their ex? That right there is showing that you may have dipped into some of the unuseful types of curiosity. So you may have thought, I don't think the client should be reaching out to their ex because I just believe that that's not ever a healthy thing to do. So then you might start having some judgmental coaching questions. You might say, why would you reach out to your ex? Why would you do that? That would be judgmental curiosity. Or you might start going all scattered and disorganized and asking them questions about very miscellaneous things like, oh, so how long has it been since you've split with your ex? Or, well, how did you meet your ex? Or, well, what happened when you broke up? Or, well, have you reached out to them already in the past, right? So they might sound like useful questions, but they're all very surface level. It's just focusing on the story, lots of details that we actually don't need. And then there could be biased curiosity that you may start to have because you have an assumption around what the quote right approach is that your client should take. So you might start to ask questions that try to persuade your client to see things the way you want them to see things. So you might ask some biased questions like, well, have you ever considered that your ex is not a good fit for you? Or what if your ex has already moved on? Or what if your ex just repeats the same type of behavior that they had when you were dating? So these are leading questions. They are, in a way, just planting problems for the client because they're things that you think are important, but they're not necessarily allowing the client to make an empowered choice for themselves, okay? So what would it really sound like if this came up in a session for you to have total neutral curiosity. So if your client says they're thinking of reaching out to their ex and they want to explore that in this session, neutral curiosity would sound like this. Okay, so when you say you want to reach out to your ex, what does that bring up for you? So when you say you want to reach out to your ex, how would you like to explore that in this session? Tell me more about your desire to reach back out to your ex. Do you hear the difference? So neutral tone, you're clarifying, you're better understanding what the client is thinking, what their thoughts are, what they're currently surfacing, and you're letting that come up to the surface gently, and you're just going to explore it together. You're just examining it without a bias around it, just to see what your client comes up with, what they really want, and where they want to go. So if you are maybe seeing that you have opportunities for growth here in having neutral curiosity in your coaching sessions, then firstly, you're not alone. Some of the best ways to make sure you're staying in neutral curiosity is absolutely having a space, having a community where you're getting supervised feedback on your coaching, where your coaching is getting supervised, so that way a mentor, an instructor, a facilitator are able to listen to you coach and point out the areas where your coaching is slipping out of neutral curiosity. Some other ways that you can stay neutral is asking yourself, when you're working with your clients, do you see yourself as the solution, or are you seeing them as the solution? So how much do you see yourself as the coach, the source of the solution, versus seeing your client as the source of the solution? If you want to stay neutral, you must see your client as the source of the solution. Another great question to ask yourself is, how much do you really believe in your client? How much do you really see the best in your clients? Because if you don't see the best in them, if you don't believe in them, you'll start to pity them, you'll start to worry about them, and as a result, you'll have a lot of biased curiosity. You will try to rescue them through your questions, which is what you don't want to do. Another question to help you stay neutral is, do you think that you know better than your clients? How much do you think you are the one that knows better than your clients? Okay. It's very powerful when you can see your client as this tremendous source of wisdom, and you're just removing some things that are blocking them from getting there. But the more deeply you're able to believe in your clients and not think that you know any better than them, then the more powerful your questions are going to be, and the faster it is that they're going to start surfacing their own breakthroughs in your session. Another question to stay neutral is, how attached are you to your client's breakthrough? How attached are you to your client's breakthrough? The more attached you are to their breakthrough, the more you're going to start leading them and pushing them to start having or forcing insights upon them. And you really can't force an insight. A breakthrough has got to come up naturally for the client through their own awareness. Okay, so you want to make sure you're released from needing to have a breakthrough. Sometimes coaches, they will think that every session is always about the breakthrough, and they will try to push and force an insight onto a client and ask them questions so they could get to some kind of an insight they think they need to have. And that's not effective, even though it might seem effective. And then the final question to help you stay in neutral curiosity is, how much are you taking responsibility for your client's problem? How much are you taking responsibility for your client's problem? Okay, so you can deeply care about your client, and you could really be committed to them getting amazing results, but you don't want to take responsibility for their problem. You don't want to make their problem your problem, okay? You are not responsible for your client's problem. You're not responsible for your client overcoming that problem. You're responsible for believing in your client, honoring the coaching process, and helping them understand where they are now, where they want to be, and how they could eliminate everything getting in the way of that. All right, that's what I got in this episode on how to ask the right questions in a coaching session. This has been really fun, a little bit of a higher level concept, So it's okay if some of this is not landing totally. This is a good one to listen over again. And of course, inside the academy, we will give you so much support in making sure that you are staying in neutral curiosity and helping your clients get the best possible results. All right, thanks for listening, and I will see you in the next episode. Hey, would you like access to powerful coaching tools you can use on yourself and clients right away? For being a listener of the podcast, I'm giving you a VIP guest pass to get a sneak peek into my coach training program. Inside, you'll learn our coaches' secret tool they use to transform their clients' lives. And you'll also get a training on how to launch a coaching business. Just head over to www.thrivingcoachacademy.com/VIP to get started. I'll see you on the inside.